Is waterboarding torture?
The President instructed us that nothing we would do would be outside of our obligations, legal obligations, under the Convention Against by the President. It did not torture. So that's, and by the way, I didn't authorize anything. I conveyed the authorization of the administration to the agency. And so, by definition, if it was authorized by the President, it did not violate our obligations under the Convention Against Torture.
Returning to our program once again, former Nixon White House counsel John Dean, also, of course, author of Broken Government and Worse Than Watergate. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you, Keith.
Can you explain what Dr. Rice just probably unintentionally admitted to there?
Well, it's quite surprising. She clearly admitted she's not an attorney because she wouldn't have made the statement she made. She was trying to say she hadn't authorized anything. Then she proceeded to say that she had indeed passed orders along to the CIA to engage in torture if it was legal by the standard of the Department of Justice. This really puts her right in the middle of a common plan, as it's known in international law, or a conspiracy, as it's known in American law. And this indeed is a crime if it indeed happened the way we think it did happen.
Was this more the Nixon-Frost defense, or was she trying to say that President Bush only authorized methods that were already legal, and since that included waterboarding, therefore working backwards, waterboarding must have been legal?
Well, it's a little fuzzy what she was saying, and she was obviously trying to extricate herself and keep herself in a safe distance, that she was only operating under some general guidance of the President making things legal. So it's not clear whether this is a full-throated Nixonian-type defense, Keith, or whether it's a lot of confusion of the facts and just throwing things up there to try to protect herself.
Ultimately, though, I mean, Dr. Rice or Secretary Rumsfeld or Vice President Cheney, or all of them singing as a barbershop trio, could sit there and say, yes, we signed and we conveyed all kinds of authorizations regarding waterboarding. Does it matter at all if they have been put above the law by the subsequent president and the subsequent Congress?
Well, you know, it may not matter, as it turns out, in the United States, but I got to tell you, I think it is going to matter what they say and how they say it and when they say it abroad, because there are indeed investigations going on. We had news yesterday that Judge Garzon in Spain is indeed proceeding with an investigation and inquiry there. He's not announced any specific names, but he's certainly looking at these. These kinds of statements are going to come back and be very interesting to any investigator.
And I don't want to overstate this point or put too fine a point on it either, but if President Obama says waterboarding was torture, which is what he said at the news conference last night, there was no equivocation about that, is he not admitting now, in a sense, that he too is in violation of the Geneva Conventions and the obligations to investigate and prosecute torture? Because that's the part we never seem to remember about the Geneva Conventions. The second part says, if there is evidence of it in your country, you, the leaders of that country, are supposed to do something about it, at least in terms of an investigation.
That's very true, Keith, and indeed he is indeed in violation if the United States does not undertake investigation of this or ultimately prosecution if that's necessary. It's not only the Geneva Convention, the Convention Against Torture also requires this. There are no exceptions with torture. There are no real things like torture light. The world community, I think, is going to hold the United States responsible, and if we don't proceed, somebody is going to proceed.
John, you saw the President's answers on those questions about torture and waterboarding, and did the previous administration authorize it and engage in it, and did they break international law in doing so? He seemed to give all the elements out of which you would make a yes to that question without ever saying yes. Do you think there is a possibility he's doing this deliberately to hope that there is a greater groundswell for prosecution of this in this country? Or what was the nature of that kind of what certainly sounded like hair splitting from here?
Well, it is interesting. The New York Times poll just earlier this week came out that 62% of the American people do not think there should be investigations and prosecutions of torture. So there is not a broad public support for this this idea of proceeding anyway against these people. So that might well be what he's doing, and he clearly does want to avoid the political consequences of this and any blowback that occurs from any investigation you might undertake. So I think he's going slowly, which is appropriate, and he has given it to his Attorney General, who's going to make the ultimate decision.
John Dean, author of Worse Than Watergate and Broken Government, and always of great help in trying to understand this subject. Thank you, John. All the best.
Thank you, Keith.
Administration to the agency. And so, by definition, if it was authorized by the President, administration to the agency. And so, by definition, if it was authorized by the President,